Morning, everybody. Today's an episode I've been excited about making for quite a long time. It's something I've been kind of wanting to get to, but I've got a lot of things going on. So I rearranged my records from my label back to alphabetical over a year ago. And I enjoyed having it alphabetical, and has a lot of advantages. It gives you an artist's career's perspective much clearer. It's easier to find certain things. But when you sort it by label, there's so many advantages to that in terms of learning chronology, label, artist stables, who's innovative when a label came to the fore. It just gives you all these timelines that you can cross-reference and just really see what's happening year by year in New York, Chicago, LA. It's a very insightful format. And in so doing, you also start to learn the chronology of each label's sequence. So when Parker's Savoys were versus Donald Byrd's, at what point does Lee Morgan show up at Blue Note? What time does he leave? You get all this little bits of insight that really help color and shade the history of jazz and give you insights that you just don't get any other way. And the labels certainly tell their own stories. They have their own style of management, style of art. That's another thing you can see when you set things up by label, is a label's art department. How does that change and morph and grow? Why does all of jazz recede graphically post 1967, 68? By 1970, jazz album covers are the worst, aside from CTI, who's making some of the coolest album covers really ever. Creed Taylor was always kind of going to make sure of that. But so I moved it back to by label, and I did it about a month ago. And moving the actual records wasn't that hard. Sorting them out by their sequence, the numbers, takes some time. I have a lot of pollen and dust in this house from small rural town. Kicking it up messes with my allergies, messes with my eyes. They water and they get little. It's not fun, and that stuff gets in all the cracks, gets in the plastic of my records. So moving records almost always impacts me health-wise. Nothing debilitating, but it's still a nuisance to have your eyes watering for 3 days and little granules coming out, and you sleep and your eyes get kind of bleh. And like I said, the dust is so fine that it can make my asthma and my breathing really short of breath, which isn't always that fun to do, especially with COVID rumors and all that going on. But anyway, my two stepkids helped me get it done, and I've done the sequencing of most of the labels. There's some I haven't sorted out by chronology yet, and I need to do it, but it won't prohibit me from showing you what we've done. I got most of my stickers up for these different labels now, so you can kind of see clearly the scale of how many records each label made. For those of you who don't know the channel very well, I have a fairly complete discography of a lot of the major jazz labels, American that is, and I really chronologize the American jazz scene from the late 40s through the mid 60s fairly extensively. Most of the major artists, I have most of their major titles. Most of those major artists also helped define for me what the major labels were. I started collecting all those labels and all the in-between artists that were kind of unknown. You learn that some labels have very few unknown titles. There's not a lot of Blue Notes that don't have pretty good circulation and well known by name and title in the jazz community, versus a label like Savoy or Argo, where half the titles most people have never seen, versus some of the small labels where most titles nobody's ever seen. And then there's all these little micro labels that will do 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 records, 30 records, and I was filling those gaps in somewhat as well these last 6 months. And a lot of it was West Coast white jazz, cool, hard driving West Coast stuff. And it was good to fill that stuff in and get to know those labels as well, so I can present a fuller picture of the American jazz landscape in the 50s and 60s. It's a labor of love. I'm excited to show this to you. And without further ado, let's move on and I'll start showing you what we did.